Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, and you, my friend, are listening to Light Talk.
And this is Stan in Gainesville, Florida. And today, it's time for another interview on Light Talk with my dear friend, Ellen Lampert-Greaux.
And good morning. This is Brackley in Las Vegas, Nevada, where it's a dry 112 degrees.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California, where it's 73 degrees with 20% humidity and a brisk ocean breeze blowing COVID germs all over us from all the unmasked morons on the beach. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers.
Hey, you did that flat. I liked it.
Totally flat. Welcome to everyone to episode 172. And boy, we have a great show for you today. First, we want to welcome Brackley back to the show. Hey, how are things in Vegas, Brackley?
Hey, still slow, but still going. But a dry heat here.
Dry heat.
Okay.
It's not a dry heat here. It's like a wet diaper.
I know.
Well, you're in the swamp.
Yes.
I mean, Light Talk Central's in the swamps of
Yeah, but it's good
Florida.
for my hair.
Yes.
Right, your complexion.
I don't have hair. We also have a very special surprise for you today. Today, we'll be chatting with our good friend, Ellen Lampert-Greaux. Hi, Ellen.
Hey, how you doing, guys?
Oh, great. How are things in the Caribbean?
Terrific. It's a humid sort of 88 degrees today. We've had a little rain, which we really needed. We are COVID-free. The island is open to tourists, so come on down.
Really?
Oh,
Yep.
let's
I'm
go.
heading there. We're going. But, the problem is you can't take an airplane.
No, we have to take a canoe.
It's a long way by a canoe.
Canoe is a fun word to say.
Yes, Tippy Canoe and Tyler, too. It would take you a week to get here, but,
Hey,
canoe?
don't we have like a Light Talk Catamaran?
that would be good.
Not-
I mean, we could
Not yet.
that'd be a great tax deduction.
What about the Light Talk private jet?
No.
That would be
too
good.
elitist.
Too elitist.
Too
We don't do
elitist.
that.
We're not profit oriented. Right.
Okay, before we get started with Ellen, though, we have Letters to Light Talk Central.
This is a big one.
So if you guys and gals remember, 2 weeks ago we received a rather stern letter from Luther Pope from Parts Unknown complaining about our show. Well, to be quite honest, most of our letters complain about the show. But anyway,
We get lots of feedback.
Among his many trivial points, Luther actually wants a danceable version of the theme song. Yeah. This past week we received a letter that, quite frankly, makes doing this show all worthwhile. Let me read the letter to you. Campbell from Portland, Oregon writes, Dear Lumen Brothers and Sister, I would like to start this email by telling you that I'm a huge fan of your show, and I have been listening to your episodes every day on my walks for quite a few months. I love your show so much. I think you should create a Lumen Brothers online merchandise store.
David can't do that.
I would buy some. He says.
You're not capable.
Also, I would love it if one of you could send me a copy of your theme song because I would like to make it the ringtone on my phone.
Wow.
Now, an introduction and suggestions. My name is Campbell, and I am 13 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon.
13.
I am obsessed with lighting, and I have been for pretty much my whole life. But just 3 years ago, I actually got a chance to light a show. At the time, I was going to the middle school, and next year I'll be going to high school. I got the role as a light board operator in 6th grade by basically bugging the director and good friend of mine to let me try it until she said that, why don't we give him a chance? I became the youngest ever person to set hands on anything in the booth in the school's history. From there on, I climbed the ranks. By the end of the year, I became basically the resident lighting designer in the school's theater because those high schoolers always did shows in the proscenium theater. I have been doing that for 3 years now in the Black Box Theater, and I have so many wonderful memories in that theater. In my 3 years in the theater, I've become a very proficient EOS programmer and HOG programmer. I am currently teaching myself MA and Onyx. I have also taught myself Vectorworks, Vision, and various other theater programs listed on my website. I have also created a light lab in the basement of my house that consists of some cheap, by cheap I mean $25, RGB pars, some mid-class RGBW pars, some cheap Chinese movers, 2 Studio Spot 250s, and 2 Mac Auras and Elation Fuse pars. on loan from my local rental house.
It's unbelievable.
Some of this I got donated to me by my mentor, and some of it I bought with my allowance. Good for you, Campbell. For my control, I have a Hog DMX widget and an ETC Nomad student package donated to me by Rick Wolf of ETC. In my basement light lab, I create light shows and Disney immersive experiences. He says, here's a video of 2 of them, and we actually have that footage, and it looks fantastic. He says, unedited footage, so please forgive the background chatter of my parents.
I watched it. It was fabulous.
Great. As far as my experience, I would say that I'm more talented in the programming aspect, but I am by all means fascinated with the design aspect and love to improve my skills. I am very lucky to have lots of wonderful people in the business to help me out on my journey so far. Here are some of them. Jason Badger of Disney Imagineering, Ward Ramsdell, Kurt Doemelt of Nautilus Entertainment Design, Hollywood Lights, Rick Wolf, and the spirit and legacy of Fred Foster from ETC and Jaffe Weidman. It has been my lifelong dream since I have been very young to light for Disney Imagineering, and it's definitely a dream job for me, so getting to know Jason was a really big deal for me. My question for you is, do you have any tips for how to get everything in your design done in the amount of time allotted in the theater? What are some tips you have? Is visualization a viable option, or does the 3D modeling take too much time? Thanks in advance, Campbell. P.S. I would love it if you actually came out with the Maui Wowie gel collection. I generally think it's an amazing idea because I have been to Maui and the lighting there is really like nowhere else in the world. So Stan, I think you came up with that one, didn't you? The Maui Wowie gel collection?
I did. I came up with it when I was in Maui. It was when I was still, helping write sponsors. This kid is like, how do you not fall in love with this kid? He's phenomenal. And I've been having interaction with him. We've been back and forth on email about programs and software, and it's a kick. I can't wait to meet him.
Yeah, it's great. Ellen, now you've been involved in educational theater for a long time, through all your work. What do you think about a kid like this?
I think it's great. I love kids who are that motivated and who know what they want to do at an early age, even if they change direction a little later. It's great that he's getting this incredible background now and that he can teach himself to do all this stuff. And, at the master classes in New York, we used to have sometimes a parent would call up and say, my son or daughter is 14 or 16, and I really don't want them to come to New York alone. Can I stay in the dorm with them? Or if we get an Airbnb, can I sit with him in the classes? And one mother, I finally said, your kid might be 16, but he is so smart. I think you should go shopping and get your hair done tomorrow and let him interact with the other people in the class, and don't sit with him the whole time because he's not getting the full experience. So you do come across them from time to time. It's great.
It's amazing. He's 13 years old.
I know, amazing.
Incredible.
And I mean, and he's already has these industry connections, which is great.
Right.
And we'll send you links to his portfolio. It's really amazing. His portfolio is beautiful.
It is.
And his videos of these environmental, virtual effects that he's done is in his basement of all places. It's fantastic.
It's so beautiful. Your point, David, about like what he's been able to make connections, I think that's a result of the communications that we have in the current era, because I think, if we wouldn't have been able to do that when we were kids. We couldn't connect with professionals the way he can because of the internet. Really, it sort of makes a whole different world. I remember putting on shows in my bedroom for my parents with my sister on top of the dresser with a flashlight running the follow spot. And I made little curtains with wooden blocks and strings and blankets, and I was doing that too. But I had no way could I have reached out in the way that Campbell has. So that's really just a sign of our times. And that's one of the beautiful things about that. There's ups and downs about the internet, but that's one of the great, I think, results of it.
Well, I certainly did. One of the problems I had, though, was the cat kept eating my my homing pigeon.
Yes.
That pigeon could never get. It would hop out of the cage, and all of a sudden it was a meal for Toffee. So it ended it right there.
He sounds like an incredible young man. I'm just hoping that he keeps that energy up and is not burned out after time.
The person he needs to talk to, we need to introduce him to Jane Childs.
That's a good idea. It's a good idea. You know, Steve, your point about the homing pigeons, I was also into sports as a kid. And what I was able to do with baseball cards, I would be able to, somehow I got the addresses of the baseball teams and I would send them letters asking them for merchandise. And the most generous baseball team was the St. Louis Cardinals. They would send me stickers and baseball caps. So yeah, but reaching out was very difficult back in those days. And now it's easier.
Light Talk didn't exist.
No, it didn't.
No, certainly didn't.
Couldn't have.
Right.
That was probably a good thing, though.
It's a very good thing. So, Campbell, we just, if you notice, we haven't really answered your questions.
Right.
Because we have this crazy idea about bringing you on the show to ask them personally to us. So, that is going to hopefully be in an upcoming episode. And if we can make it work, that's great. If we can't, we'll figure something else out and answer your questions. Because right now, we actually have a guest today, and it's Ellen. And we're going to get to interviewing her right now to find out more about what's going on in her life in the Caribbean. So, Brackley, why don't you tell us a little bit about Ellen?
Okay, so Ellen is a writer, editor, event producer who specializes in entertainment design and technology and architectural lighting. She writes regularly for Live Design, LiveDesignOnline.com. She attended NYU, where she was an English major, and Temple University for a BFA in television film production. She earned her MFA in Arts Administration and Theater Management from Brooklyn College and was a publicity director of the Brooklyn Academy of Music from 1979 to 1986. She is a member of ATPAM, the Press Agent and Company Manager Union, and served as publicity director at the Williamstown Theater Festival in Massachusetts from 1979 to 1982, and was managing director of the Weather Vane Theater in New Hampshire in 1977 and 78. From 1984 to 1993, she was based in Avignon, France, where she was the managing director of the French-American Film Workshop, an international festival for French and American independent cinema. For the past 31 years, she has also been the creative director of LDI, North America's leading annual trade show for entertainment design and technology, programming and producing workshops, and training for industrial professionals. She also serves as the conference director for the Live Design Masterclasses in sound, lighting, projection, and other topics. She is the founder and co-director of the 25th-year-old St. Bart Film Festival, a pan-Caribbean festival that takes place on the island of St. Bart in the French West Indies, where she currently lives, as well as editor-in-chief for Harbor Magazine with editions for St. Bart and St. Martin, English language editor of the St. Bart Weekly, and writes for a variety of publications on freelance basis, including Architectural SSL, solid-state lighting. Welcome, Ellen.
Thank you,
Ellen.
Brackley.
And we also share the same birthday. We're both Capricorns.
Yes, we do. We're Capricorns.
The same birthday?
Yes.
What birthday is it?
January 12th.
Wow.
And I won't tell you the year.
No, we don't need to know the years, but
Also, Philadelphia. I'm from Philadelphia as well. So
Yes, me too.
Oh, two Phillies.
Can you believe it?
I like that.
Yeah, but Ellen, we just remember that you went to Brooklyn College like I did about the same
Yes,
time.
absolutely. I got my MFA there in 1980 in Stephen Langley's program.
Stephen Langley.
Yep.
Wow, I remember that.
So, Ellen, is there a special Caribbean birthday meal? Do you go out in the ocean and just rip the bounty from the ocean and cook up a meal for yourself? Octopus, okay.
No, I don't eat octopus, although my husband does. But I have a funny octopus story if you'd like to hear it.
Absolutely.
I'd love to hear it.
During Hurricane Irma, some very close friends of mine from Delaware were locked down here in a hotel because they were told not to stay in their own house, that the ceiling and roof would be ripped off, which indeed it was. So they stayed in a hotel, and another couple that was there left immediately after the hurricane. They had to get off the island, and they said to our friend Dale, "We left a big cooler on our porch. Take what's ever in it." So Dale, who owns Atlantic Liquors in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, assumed it was a cooler full of alcohol. And when he went down with his wife, they were very surprised to find a frozen octopus in there. And they really didn't know what to do with it. And there was no Wi-Fi on the island at the time. But the wife had heard that there was a Wi-Fi set up at the fire station. So she went over there and called up on her iPad how to cook a frozen octopus and took a picture of the page because she knew she couldn't call it up again when she got back to the hotel. And they made it, and halfway through, the propane on their stove tank ran out, so they had to go to another little villa at the same hotel to finish the octopus. And she said it wasn't really that great, but the experience of finding it and making it was so totally Caribbean, they will never forget. That was their Hurricane Irma post dinner.
Wow.
This could be your autobiography.
Oh, I'm telling you.
How to cook a frozen octopus.
Exactly.
I'd buy a copy right now. So let me ask you a question here. Your intro into LDI and what the hell is it DMX? How does that go together?
Well, I'll tell you. In 1988, I was living in the south of France, and one of my dear friends and mentor, Pat Mackay, who founded LDI in 1988, said to me, I really need you to come back. I was writing freelance for her magazines at the time, Theater Crafts and Lighting Dimensions. And she said, high-end systems and a lot of the other companies, they really want us to start a trade show for the rock and roll lighting industry. And I'm going to do it, and it's going to be in Dallas. And I really need you to come do all the marketing and promotion for this. So I'm like, okay. So I started working with her on that in 88. The person who did the very first conference programming was Ann Daly, who was the editor of Lighting Dimensions at the time. But the second year, Ann didn't want to do the programming. So Pat said, well, will you do the programming for the conference as well? I'm like, sure. So she hands me a piece of paper with all the lists of what the sessions were going to be. And one of them says DMX and beyond. So I go, what the hell is DMX? So Pat says to me, oh, you have to call Steve Terry. Well, who's Steve Terry? Well, she says, he's at Production Arts. Call Production Arts. So I call Production Arts and I say to Steve Terry, hi, I work for Pat Mackay at, LDI, and I'm programming the sessions this year. And there's a session called DMX and Beyond, and I don't know what DMX is. So he says very nicely, oh, no, don't tell me Pat hired another moron.
Ouch.
I said, well, I'm not exactly a moron, but I'm not really on the technical side of this, but I'm a quick learner. So he was really sweet, and he gave me his home phone number, and I called him that night, and I got the rundown on DMX, and that was my real intro to the technology side of this business.
How interesting.
Wow. I would have run away if I heard about DMX the first thing. I said, oh, these guys, they really know what the hell's going on, don't they?
Right.
So how long have you been at LDI now?
32 years, since 88, really.
Wow.
What's your favorite thing about LDI?
My favorite thing about LDI is the people, really, about everybody getting together and people that you talk to all year and getting to see them and share meals with them and listen to them speak and have them share their expertise with the industry and watching people do hands-on lighting console training and media server training and projection mapping and pulling together really young designers and the 13-year-old geniuses like Campbell and getting them, on to the next generation. And it's been really interesting. Who knew in 1988 that I would still be doing this? And I have to say that after David Johnson left in December, I think I'm the only person on the entire team that was actually hired by Pat. There was David and myself, and then David moved on, and I think that leaves me, although some of the people on the staff, Kelly Turner, who's the sales manager, came to us in 1996 when Pat first sold the company. So there are some longstanding people. And, of course, Marion, who's just great and has taken over the leadership role for our franchise for LDI and Live Design, and it's just a pleasure working with her. So it's the people, really.
I now know the secret password at LDI, and I'm going to share it with our listeners. I was walking in LDI, and someone stopped me and said, your badge is incorrect. And I said, oh, Ellen said it'd be all right. And they would come right in, sir. Come right in.
Security. Ellen loves hearing about this.
Oh, that's funny.
The guy like Steve Woods come by and goes, keep him out. It's funny, Ellen, because that was 1988, right? 88 was the first year.
88 was the first year.
I believe that was my first or second year at SMU, and I came back to run the program there. And I was there at that LDI. Number one.
The one in Dallas?
Dallas, Texas.
In Dallas. Yeah.
Where was number two and where was 2 and 3? Dallas was
first. Nashville was second, and I believe Reno was third.
I think Reno was maybe my first one.
Yeah, I went to
Boston.
Reno, too.
Wasn't there one at Boston?
No, we've never been to Boston. USITT was in Boston.
That's what it was, after USITT.
Yeah.
USITT.
And I remember seeing you there too. And I may have met you back then too, because I was doing some little things. I think there was an article on me in Lighting Dimensions of some things I was doing. And Did you write that one?
I don't think so, but
Was it
I
on
do
the SMU
remember
program?
you. And the funny thing about that was that it was not at the convention center. It was in the basement of a building called the Infomart.
The Infomart.
Across
right.
from the Anatole Hotel where we all stayed, which was quite extraordinary. And the people in that building on Friday thought that there was either an earthquake or a supersonic plane in the basement because the decibel level must have been 120 to 125, and the building was literally, moving on its joists.
Oh, yeah.
I just think of the evolution of LDI over the years. I was at the one in Reno, and I just remember it being so loud. I mean, you walk in that room, and then over the years, and they had a quiet room and then a loud room. But then over the years, it has got quieted down quite significantly and really nicely.
Was that 91, Ellen?
Yeah,
Reno was
Reno
91.
may have been 91, and then again in 94. In Orlando, our first show may have been Orlando 90. So it may have been Dallas, Nashville, Orlando, Reno.
I think I was living in the Midwest and I drove to Reno for LDI with students.
Right.
And people said to me, "You're bringing students to this show? This is like an adult show." And I remember saying, "These are your future customers. What are you talking about?"
Exactly. The second time we did Reno, which was in 1994, there was a snowstorm.
That's the one I was at. I remember the
That might have been the
snowstorm.
year I was in. That might have been my Reno year,
Yeah,
94.
and there were
possibly.
people who were trying to get over some pass from Sacramento with their gear and their trucks, and they got stuck. And
That's the Donner Pass.
Yes.
Oh,
Well, I
yeah,
remember
there
we
you
They started
go.
to eat each other.
okay, well, fortunately, they didn't get that stuck.
having a bumpy plane ride into Reno that year, I remember.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Brackley, it hasn't gotten quieter. Your ears are just blown out. You're going
Your
deaf,
ears.
man.
Actually, the one of the most incredible things we did at LDI ever was in that Reno year. We started our backstage Las Vegas experiences, and the show wasn't in Las Vegas, so we hired a private plane that had 100 seats. And the 90 or so people who signed up to go on the first backstage Las Vegas event all piled out on Sunday afternoon onto buses, went to the airport. We didn't even have to go through the airport. We went right to the tarmac. They got on the bus. We took their luggage. There were box dinners on the bus, including or on the plane actually, and some of the people that were involved in the first Las Vegas first or second Cirque du Soleil show where we were going the next night or that night, maybe right off the plane, included Luc Lafortune and Jonathan Deans, and they were on the plane with us. And we got off, and the buses took them right to Treasure Island. Their luggage was taken to their hotel, which was also, I guess, Treasure Island, put in their room. And we went outside and watched the Buccaneer Bay, whatever it was, pirate show.
Back when it was a pirate show.
Yes. It was Hail Britannia. I think it was the United States sinking the Brits or something.
Yes, it was a great show.
Wow.
And now it's a CVS pharmacy.
Right. And then we went to see Mystère. I think we had dinner at the buffet in the hotel and went to see Mystère. And then Jonathan and Luke spoke afterwards. And that was really quite an extraordinary experience. Getting those people on that plane and flying them to Vegas from Reno. And that's an experience I'll never forget. That was really quite something.
I bet you can't do that anymore due to insurance reasons.
Probably.
Like hire a plane.
Right, probably. Well, in those
In a
days.
snowstorm.
Right. Well, fortunately, the snow had stopped by then. But, Pat McKay is an extraordinary person and was always sort of fearless. And because we didn't have a larger company with, the kind of concerns that larger companies rightfully have, Pat was willing to do all kinds of stuff. We had a pyro, I think it may have been the same year or the first year in Reno, we had a pyro demo where we borrowed a set that we never intended to give back. They didn't want it back. They were going to burn it anyway, from a local theater. And two guys from Orlando Universal Studios shipped out some giant propane tanks. Now that I think about it, it's like, why didn't we just get them in
This is
town?
insane.
I know. And we bought a car. We bought a car for $100. And they didn't tell us two things. They didn't tell us to put plywood under the tires. And they didn't tell us to take out the windshield. They just told us to make sure there was no oil or gasoline or anything in it. And the pyro guys put holes in the side of the car and filled it with, pyro and painted it over. And the same thing with the set. And they had like a cowboy shoot 'em up. And the car eventually exploded. And all that glass went right over the head of the audience and shattered behind them. We did have fire watch, and the firemen were ready to go. Fortunately, no one was injured, but the tires melted into the parking lot. Now we know if you blow up a car, take out the windshield and put plywood under the tires.
I mean, you have gone completely psycho. You made those laser guys put a wall up so they didn't blast the airplanes.
Right.
And you actually have the gall now to say no smoking.
Right.
So if I want to blow a car up in the parking lot, no problem.
Well, outside, but I don't think they would let me do that anymore either. We used to do some pretty wild stuff.
Oh,
you need the Hall of Fog where it's just smoke in there, and we just walk in and wander around.
It used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It was insane.
We used to have the
Agreed.
dark hall, the loud hall,
The loud hall. Yeah, I remember that.
One year we had DB patrol, a bunch of, our interns walking around in bright red tour jackets that, DB on the back and they like these speakers are like the people that are blowing the subwoofers up to 150 dB are like, who are you, kid? Out of my booth,
Out of my booth, kid.
Well, they couldn't get there. The sound wave was
Right.
pushing them back out.
The force field.
Exactly.
Oh, God. Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Don't do this at home, kids.
Right,
It was
please
the
do not
Wild
try that,
West
right.
in the 80s.
It's a lot more tame now, really, when you think about it.
It is.
Because I think because of insurance issues, right,
Right.
Ellen?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
It's,
It could be because we're all getting older, too.
Right.
there are a lot of young people on LDI. I mean, they're taking our place. We're just dinosaurs going back all the time, but it's great. It's good stuff. so.
Absolutely.
Changing scope here, could you explain the joys and demands of expat life?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I never intended to be an expat, but in the summer of 1983, instead of going back to the Williamstown Theater Festival for a 5th season, I was invited to go to France. To the south of France. A friend had a company called Réciproque, which means reciprocal agreement, as it were. And the idea was to bring American arts presenters to the south of France to go to a lot of the festivals and look at dance companies that could eventually be brought to the United States. So I went representing BAM, and we were on the cusp of starting our Next Wave Festival. And 2 companies that were going to be at the Avignon Festival that summer, Pina Bausch and Carolyn Carlson, were already on our program for BAM. And it just seemed a nice fit. Harvey Lichtenstein, the head of BAM at the time, was really the person invited on this, but everybody else that was going was sort of, my age, and it was in a station wagon or a minivan, and he was already going to be on somebody's yacht at Cap d'Antibes and did not want to ride around in the back of a station wagon. So I got to go on this, and I also presented my friend Marta Renzi's dance company at the Off Festival in Avignon that summer and began to meet people there. And one of the people I met there was a crazy Texan by the name of Jerry Rudis, who had a little place called the French American Center of Provence. And oddly enough, it was upstairs from a cinema that was in an old chapel. So if you got there late and started inching your way down the side wall, you were really surprised when your hand ran across a life-size saint of some sort, because the church had not been dismantled. But there were 2 filmmakers, an American woman by the name of Tammy Hoffs, whose claim to fame, I guess, is her daughter, Susanna Hoffs, who wrote the song Walk Like an Egyptian, which is another long story, and Agnes Varda. And they had gotten to Jerry and said, hey, you are upstairs from the cinema. Why don't we do a French-American film workshop and we could show our movies? And that's sort of how this thing got grown. And I met Jerry there that summer, and he's like, well, we're going to do this in 84. And since you're in New York, there were no faxes or email or anything in those days. Things went by transatlantic pneumatic tube. So Jerry was like, you'll be in New York. You're at BAM. You can probably make international phone calls. Why don't you be the U.S. representative for this thing, and all the American independent filmmakers, people nobody ever heard of, like Quentin Tarantino, will call you and we'll take a look at their films, which was complicated in those days, So that's what I did. And then Jerry was like, well, why don't you come in the summer of 84 and run this thing with me? So I did from 84. Went back to BAM in 85, and then by the end of 85 moved to the south of France sort of full-time and stayed there on and off until Pat called me back in 88. And then I back and forth until my friend Nancy Piccioni twisted my arm to come to St. Bart's in 1989. And she said, look, it's the first winter you're not going back to France, and you'll love it. It's like Provence light. They have croissants. They have pain au chocolat. They speak French. You should come with me. And I did, and met some wonderful people here. And then the third year I was here, I ran into the detour in my life, which is now my husband of 27 years.
The detour.
And got stuck, never intending. But having lived in France, I figured, well, I could live here. Although I don't go to the beach, and I don't really like sand and sun and bugs and heat. And,
You're on an island?
Yeah. Could be lost on me, but the views of the ocean are spectacular.
Oh, yeah.
Sadly, what's happened here in the past 30 years is unbridled greed and construction. So it doesn't really look like it looks. I mean, if you ask Pat McKay what it was like when she came to my wedding here in 1992, it's really, really changed. But people who have never seen it before get off the plane and they're like, oh my God, why haven't I been here before? So I guess it still looks like paradise to a lot of people, although a lot of us miss the way it was. We sort of suffer from nostalgia. But, it's very interesting. It's being an American and an expat, you tend to gather with other Americans and other expats, and they kind of come and go. So your friendships and your relationships are a little different than like if you live in a small town. But there's a lovely, even though I'm Jewish, there is a lovely Anglican church here, which is really sort of a cultural center for the island. And that's sort of where the Americans of all denominations gather. And there's a book club, and there's a meditation circle, and there's a lot of things there that are not necessarily religious, but are cultural. So it's a nice place to meet people. The people that are from the island, like my husband's family and all, they're very sort of insular, and it's not easy to break into their lifestyle. So I do tend to have a lot of American and British friends here.
And what is the expat population there? Is it large?
Well, I think, full time, it's probably a couple hundred people. The island is mostly French, of two ilks, the kind like my husband, whose families came here in the 17th and 18th centuries, and stayed and expanded. And then a lot of people from metropolitan France who started coming in the 1980s for various reasons and really brought development to the island. And there are close to 1,500 Portuguese on the island now. They started coming in sort of, I guess, the mid-90s, mostly as construction workers, and they do incredible work, incredible stone work and incredible tile work. And a lot of them were single guys who came here and married young St. Bart's women because a lot of the local families had been sort of intermarrying for 300 years and running out of people who weren't their cousins. So the Portuguese have really nicely integrated themselves into the island, and they have a Portuguese folk group, and they're really wonderful, wonderful workers, especially, like I said, for stonework and tile work and stuff that it's hard to do.
What's the population of the island? 10,000
people. And I sort of confronted two tourists the other day, now that we're open post-COVID, and I said, where are your masks? And the guy said, how do you know I'm a tourist? And I said, well, the 10,000 of us who live here kind of know each other, especially after all these months of lockdown when there was clearly everyone that was here was living here. So that was interesting.
So just curious, how do you run a film festival on a tropical island that doesn't have a cinema?
You don't have a cinema?
No cinema. That's a really good question. So what happened was in 1993, when I sort of gave up running the festival in the south of France, a friend of mine, Joshua Harrison, who had been on our jury at that festival and is a wonderful documentary filmmaker, among other things, said, hey, why don't we do a festival like that in St. Bart's? So I thought, well, okay. So I said to my husband, hey, do they have a movie theater? Nope. Well, where do they show movies? Because I had seen posters for some Hollywood blockbusters around. And he said, oh, well, there's a tennis court that has an outdoor cinema. Why don't we go talk to them? So it's a nonprofit association that does a lot of stuff for kids and culture. And they actually had a tennis court. And in the building at the back of the tennis court sort of like a garage, and there was a ladder that leads up to a very small projection booth where there was an antique, and I mean antique, 35 millimeter projector that took a half a movie. One reel. They took one reel. So you'd have to stop and have a little intermission where you could sell refreshments while the poor projectionist would put the second movie. It was very hot up there. Put the second reel on. And we started this in 1996. And after a couple of years, the two local projectionists were like, could you do this every other year? It's like a lot for us to do. And, they were volunteers, very generous. And Josh, it turned out, had a brother who was married to a woman from Denmark. And her brother was a projectionist. And he knew everything about 35 millimeter projectors, how to fix them in his sleep. So we actually started bringing this guy, Steve, from Denmark every summer. And he showed up with his little black doctor bag the first year. And they were very like, oh my God, we never let anybody touch our projector. And he goes, oh, well, let me just take my Q-tip and see if we can fix the lens here a little bit. And I'm going to put some alcohol on the mirror and clean this up a little bit. And oh, look, this little wire over here needs to be pinched a little bit. And they're like, oh my God, okay, fine,
look,
fix it.
There's lumens coming out of this projector.
Exactly. And big old, $700 lamps that this thing took. And eventually they let us have Steve. And the first year we tried to show a video, nobody had a projector of any sort here. So we put a ladder in the middle of the tennis court and ran wires to it from the booth and put up cones around it so nobody got too close to it. And that was how we first showed video there. And about 5 years ago, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, they upgraded this cinema. They don't use it as a tennis court anymore because some real tennis courts were built elsewhere and a real tennis club. So this is now an outdoor cinema, and they have a Dolby sound system, which is really quite good. And they have a giant wall, which was always the screen, but has been really improved and painted and some kind of screen goo kind of stuff on it. So it's got a great image and $150,000 worth of high-tech projection equipment.
Wow.
And the way they show movies, they show Hollywood blockbusters dubbed into French. And we are a pan-Caribbean art cinema kind of thing. So they can either send you something via the internet that they download and can run, or you can attach a DVD reader or a Blu-ray reader, and that's how we show all our films now. So for people like my husband, and Steve doesn't come anymore because the 35 millimeter projector was retired. But we have a wonderful friend, Jean-Marc from Guadeloupe, who comes and is our video projectionist now. And for my husband and whoever else is in the projection side of this, it's so much easier because an entire collection of festival films fits in your backpack, and it weighs a pound maybe because it's Blu-rays and videos, unless it's one of the DCP players, which is a little heavier. But it's nothing like going to the airport and moving one 35 millimeter film, which probably weighed 100 pounds. And we would get 5 or 6 of them and have to move them from the airport to the house. And then one by one to that hot little projection booth with the half a cinema in it, and thank God we don't have to do that anymore. Right. So we also do
what time
afternoon.
Of year is it?
It's usually the last week in April, the very beginning of May.
Okay, so it's canceled this year, I take it.
And it was canceled this year. So we may, November in France is the month of documentary films. So we may do a little weekend of documentaries in November and just call them docs on the dock. And maybe do them outside at night. We always do one screening outside on the dock. And for many years, we did one on the beach. We have a big blow-up screen. It's probably, 6 meters by 4 meters.
Yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, and we did a beach screening, and we would do it. Somebody said, why do you always do it on the same beach? Why do you always do it on the beach in Flamand? And I said, well, because my mother-in-law lives there, and we pull the electricity from her house, run it across the road, around the palm tree, and down onto the beach. So thank you, Maman, for the electricity.
Yeah, they do that outside. I live on the beach. They do that in the summers. Well, they obviously not doing it this summer, but yeah, they have that big inflatable screen, and they have thousands of people out there, and it's great. That was going to be my first suggestion. I said, why don't you just do it on the beach?
Well, we do, but it's a lot of work to get that screen up and down. And it's sometimes very windy, and it's they have a little bit of They have a little bit of...
You don't want your screen to blow away in the middle of the feature film.
But we have had some extraordinary evenings with live music and live drummers, and then we segue into a drumming movie, and it is really fun on the beach. And you could do it this summer with social distancing. Just say to people, hey, move your blankets further apart.
Right.
They could stake out areas and do it with social distancing. Yeah, you could.
Maybe the width of a frozen octopus.
Exactly. Exactly. And have a barbecue and make them on the beach. You could give everybody one when they got there.
Maybe the Lumen Brothers should have a little concession stand where we could sell the octopuses with some margaritas to go.
Exactly.
Frozen margaritas to go and frozen octopuses. I mean, come on.
Exactly.
Octopus on a stick.
As part of your merchandise store, along with the caps and the T-shirts.
I think we need a mascot. I think a frozen octopus would be a good mascot for us.
I thought we were going to do a sea lion as a mascot.
Well, there you go.
Too smelly.
So where exactly is the island located? How far away from New York or the States is it?
Well, if you were on JetBlue or American Airlines, it's a 4-hour flight to either San Juan or St. Martin, where you change to a sort of puddle jumper. The classy way to come is to go to San Juan, and there's a little executive airline called Tradewind Aviation, which also runs from New York and Boston to Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, I guess. And their winter service is San Juan to St. Bart's or Antigua or a few other places. And they fly these really beautiful planes that are Pilatus, 8-seaters, very comfortable, very nice service. Or else you can go to St. Martin and get on a puddle jumper, which is just a 10-minute flight, which is the much less expensive way to go. But no jets can come here. The runway is very, very short with a mountain at one end and the beach at the other. So if you run off the end of the runway, you get wet.
I think we go to David's and we just take the sailboat around the Cape and around the Horn and up.
There you go.
Have you ever sailed around Tierra del Fuego in a catamaran? I don't think so.
No.
So Ellen, since you always have your fingers on the pulse of the industry, what do you think is coming down the road for the entertainment industry in these uncertain times?
Well, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think that what's really interesting in terms of the, people being locked down and using every creative bone in their body to try and figure out what to do while they're not working. A lot of the stuff that we've seen has involved, XR, augmented reality, and virtual reality. And that, I think, is really a big wave of the future. And I think that, the next generations, do they need to go out 7 nights a week to the theater? Probably not. Are they happy looking at things on whatever the digital market is going to send them? Yes, probably. So I think that maybe a lot of things will remain hybrid. I don't know how many of you saw the Katy Perry piece that was shot at the PRG studio, their XR studio in Los Angeles, with, Corey Fitzgerald and JT Rooney and other people involved in that, which was, I think, a brilliant example of a live performance in an augmented reality environment. And I think that that's one thing that's coming down the road. Another thing that I think is coming down the road is 5G. And nobody really knows yet what that's going to do to us. Either it's going to fry us like living in a microwave, as the naysayers are saying, or it's going to open such fast bandwidth for everybody that, Zoom will look like something from the dinosaur age. It'll be like Fred Flintstone's way of communication. And I think that that's going to open all kinds of things for, this podcast could have people calling in from all over the world live in, you could have video clips. I just think that the whole digital world is going to explode and continue to explode around us. I love Broadway theater. I grew up on Broadway theater. I grew up on dance. I love dance. The first time I ever saw an opera, I'm like, why are they singing? What are they doing? Why aren't they just dancing? I was so confused. But I've grown to love opera. But, there's a problem with all of those things. The cost of producing them is just out of the park. And Broadway is at the point where you cannot increase the number of performances per week. You cannot increase the number of seats in the theater, and you probably cannot increase the ticket prices. So where does that leave you in terms of an economic model for a Broadway show? Well, maybe it has a lot of other things that go around it. And if 5G can allow you to stream that Broadway show live for half the price into people who could never get to New York for various reasons. So you could have a live audience and a digital audience at the same time experiencing the same thing, and a talk back afterwards where the people at home can ask and answer questions in the same time frame as the people in the theater. I think that there's a whole hybrid entertainment platform coming our way in the next decade.
I have a follow-up on that. Has the Met sort of touched that idea in its live broadcast into movie theaters around the country?
Well, the Met, yes. And that, I think, is a really good example of, realizing that a lot of people cannot come to New York and cannot afford a Met ticket. And not only have they done it in the movie theater, but they have been one of the most generous companies throughout the entire pandemic with a nightly stream. And if you've been willing to watch an opera every night, you can watch almost their entire HD archive live streaming. And it's been incredible. And it's an incredible way to see the work of all the designers and the directors. And, I always say you can't tell what you like unless you know what you don't like. And, by seeing some of these wonderful, wonderful productions and some of the sort of failed experiments. And I think one of the things that I really admire about Peter Gelb over the past decade at the Met is the failed experiments, bringing in, really wildly diverse directors and designers, some of whom had never worked in that sort of an opera house before, or maybe any opera house. And they weren't really in tune with we're going to tech it in August and then it premieres in October. And you're like, what? It's a very different kind of schedule than an off-Broadway or Broadway production. And some of them worked and some of them didn't work. But I think it's a really interesting and brave way to do that. And I think that, the whole thing about having an iPad and going to the theater and having an entire augmented reality, a whole other layer of what you can see visually if you look at your iPad, which I'm not sure I like, because I like the shared experience of like looking at your neighbor and going, hey. So I think a lot of these hybrid things are going to be an answer to the economic dilemma of how to produce a live show in the future.
Absolutely. It's funny, it's interesting you said that, in our last week's show, we had Driscoll and Zach on, and we were talking about the future of Broadway. And Zach was mentioning, he goes, I don't know when we go back if they're going to be able to even fill the theaters. Mm-hmm. And how's that going to affect us? Our fees going down, things like that. And then, I watched this amazing video of Hamilton that
I saw that last night.
Disney Plus.
Incredible.
I'm watching it on a 4K television set, and I could see every single light cue perfectly.
Right.
And the depth and the contrast is better than you would ever see actually live, to tell you the truth, if you're sitting 20, 30 feet away.
For $7.
So and it's $7.
Right.
Exactly. So
I'm canceling mine.
I don't have to pay. The running joke on this show is me having to, wanting to pay $800 to see that show. No, I'm not going to do that. But I saw it for $7. But anyway,
but on the other end of the equation, that's $7 multiplied by the audience.
That's what I'm getting at, Stan.
It's an economic win.
I think this is what Ellen is talking about.
Yeah.
Is that if you have a simulcast of a Broadway show, and it's sort of the same thing. Then you could open it up to millions of people instead of just having 1,000 people in the theater.
Right.
You have millions of people who are paying $7, and those people who are privileged, or they have enough money to spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a Broadway ticket. That's great. They're there live and they get that experience. But everyone else gets the experience, and the same thing's kind of happening in education now.
Right.
Where we're talking about live streaming, but also maybe, hopefully, once we have a vaccine, that we'll have live classes again, but also opening it up so that universities can actually have another revenue stream.
Well, not only that, but you could subtitle Hamilton, for example, and like Lin-Manuel Miranda, who would probably love everyone in Puerto Rico to see it, and all of South America and all of Spain, and you could do 10 languages.
Well, they could perform it in, who knows?
Well, no, they perform it in English, but you could subtitle it the way they do with a film and have, millions of more people see it. But ultimately for the designers and the actors and the producers, it just opens an entire world. It's so much broader than Broadway.
I agree with that. I was thinking as you were discussing that, Ellen, that you could make the argument that live theater is sort of an elitist activity and that the general population doesn't get exposed to it. So doing that sort of removes that barrier. And there is a barrier to most people to experience the quality of what great theater is.
They could be just cheap like me.
But, we could do an easy test of this to see if it's going to work. This is where we have missed it. We should be charging $7 an episode for Light Talk. Then millions of people around the world. And we can simulcast them. Oh, yeah.
When you replace me with Lin-Manuel Miranda and David Diggs, then you could charge the $6.99.
Those coffee cups were like $15 each.
Yeah, those coffee cups were not cheap cups.
They were not cheap
and
coffee cups.
And they're not dishwasher safe, which
Oh,
really
no.
pisses me off.
Which makes them nostalgic.
We're just not thinking big enough. We could get Brad Pitt to play David.
Right.
Well, there was an interesting article in the New York Times yesterday talking about just this, the whole digital and the hybrid versions of what's going to be happening in the future. So that's kind of a whole interesting concept.
The other thing that's really interesting is this esports and online gaming. They have millions and millions and millions of players. And there was an interesting thing where there was one of those epic gaming things where they had a live performance by someone called a rapper, Travis Scott, dropped into one of the gaming things. And millions of people looked at it. So there are so many ways to reach the younger audience now.
Well, Ellen, we've sort of run out of time, and we want to thank you for being with us today. It's always great to see you, even from that very first time I saw you back in 1980. You're always smiling. There's always this great aura of happiness around you. Sort of remind me of Gilbert, actually. You remember Gilbert?
Yes, of
She's
course.
like a Buddha. She's
you guys are funny. You don't see me behind the scenes.
Oh, I have seen you behind the scenes.
I've seen you in the Ellen golf cart going down the hallways.
That scooter has saved my life, I'll tell you.
But this was a good show, Ellen. The insights that you provided were very provocative, very thoughtful. Really appreciate your perspective, particularly on the future.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure,
Absolutely.
a real pleasure to talk to you guys. And, I was a little nervous because I'm usually the one asking the questions. So this was a real turning of the tables, but I do appreciate it. It was great talking to you guys.
Well, thank you so much.
We'll see you all soon.
Yeah, and Ellen, maybe if you would like to be an honorary Lumen sister for an episode or two.
You know what? I would be honored.
You know what? I think we should do that because, Ellen, I have to say thank you that when we started this crazy notion, you were one of the few people that were really, really supportive.
Who didn't think we were crazy, basically.
No.
Yeah, but you said you put a thing up on the live design like these guys are kooky, but they're funny, but they're educational, and so you've been such a supporter of the show. So I think we should return that favor.
Well, she was desperate to fill that 3 o'clock period. And she wanted us to anchor Sunday afternoon.
But also, thank you for supporting that portfolio review. I mean, I think that has brought back some students to LDI like we intended about 10 years ago. So thank you.
Absolutely. And, last year we did the first pop-up ERDAs and we'll do them again. And, we believe in all this kind of outreach. And we just awarded the second annual Pat McKay Diversity and Design Scholarships. So you can go online and look at the lovely wonderful group of recipients from this year. And we've worked with the Theatrical Sound Designers and Composers Association and USITT on those. And I just love that kind of outreach and working with people. And, I keep calling Brackley and saying, when can I have your black box theater? And it hasn't worked out yet, but someday it will.
Well, we're dark now.
Yeah.
You got to have it now if you want.
No, I mean, that was the first time. about 10 years ago, we were touring the Black Box Theater for a space, and you said, well, how can we get more students involved with LDI? And I said, well, maybe we could start doing a portfolio review. And you were so supportive of that. First couple of years were a little rough. Steve remembers those with one person, but it's really grown. And last year, I think we had a good turnout. I think it went very well. So thank you.
Yes, I think last year's was terrific. And I think matching it up with the ERDAs and giving them an LDI pass and everything, I think is a really nice package for the kids.
Maybe this is a way to wrap it up. So we know that Campbell is probably listening to this show. So I think somehow we should get Campbell and his family to bring him to LDI.
Yes, absolutely.
Wouldn't that be great? All right. I just want to tell you also, Ellen, is that, and you may not have known this, but by being on the show as a guest, you are now recognized as a legend of light. Now we don't have a fancy
Do I get a sword?
I think you get a coffee cup.
No, we don't give that lightly.
You get a coffee cup that you can't wash in the dishwasher.
Yes, you can't. Non-dishwasher safe coffee mug.
I think I took one home from LDI already, but
you had the coffee mug. We finally found this.
Oh, there you go.
Well,
I think
took
I
it
took
to
blamed me for that.
Well, they were mailed to me, and I kind of took one before I gave them to you. So
Yeah, you guys.
Right.
What can I tell you?
Anyway.
No, this was great, guys.
Thank you. Well, the rocking sounds of the Luminoids tell us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on Spotify, iTunes, Google, and just about every other podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org for future guests, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to the podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk fun.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you choose to litigate, the law firm of Fleck, Flock, Flare, and Glare and their paralegal Snoot will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from the beautiful Caribbean, Long Beach, Gainesville, Las Vegas, and the Lone Star State.
And join us next week when we discuss the Disney broadcast of Hamilton in 4K.
All that and a new sponsor.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable Lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Thank you, Ellen, again, and have a safe stay down in the Caribbean. Stay healthy and stay happy. And bye-bye from Light Talk.
Easy on the eye.
Thanks, guys.